what I'm going to do is I have a couple slides we'll go through to help set the stage, and then we're going to be spending the most of the time, the next probably 45 minutes or so, showing you a live demo of exactly how we can do that with Executive Scorecard. So this slide really kind of sums up what the goal is of this webinar, is to really show how you can bridge this gap. This is something a lot of probably most organizations struggle with, where you have strategic direction being set at your executive level, but being able to convey that down to the operational level is often very tricky. In order to bridge that gap between strategy and the employee's day-to-day execution of that strategy, there's really 4 areas where leadership has to succeed. One is obviously around motivation. We all know that motivated employees lead to higher productivity. There's ownership, there's accountability, there's loyalty, and all that leads to having this, really what you need to have this alignment to your common goals or your strategy. The second one is around management. Once you define what those strategic goals are, you need to be able to cascade them down within your organization. Clearly, the strategy doesn't stop at the executive level, so you have to be successful in being able to propagate that all the way down to the lowest level within your organization so that everyone understands what those goals are and how they're able to meet those goals and objectives. The third one is really where Scorecard comes into play, is it's around monitoring and measuring. Before you can monitor progress, organizations must be able to translate the strategy into quantifiable terms, right? And that really speaks to your key performance indicators that really drive those goals and objectives. And the last one is really tying it all together, and this is probably the biggest misstep I think that organizations have, where they have this great idea of defining a strategy, but then they struggle being able to really extend that within the organization. It's either they have a lack of a well-defined strategy or execution, which obviously it's that crucial bridge to be able to bridge that gap between strategy and execution. As leadership motivates stakeholders towards these strategic objectives, manage initiatives, and support these goals and objectives, they have to have a way of regularly monitoring this in a way that it makes sense. So what a CIO would typically see on their dashboard or executive scorecard view isn't necessarily going to be the same thing that other folks or other leaders or managers within your organization is going to want to see. They're going to want to see more detail as you get further down within their organization. So let me go ahead and progress through here. Here's a couple slides to help. For those that are not too familiar with executive scorecard, this is going to help kind of visualize what this is all about. Then we'll jump into the demo, and it should make a lot of sense. This shows overall the kind of how executive scorecard came about. If you think about IT, you have your finance, FP&A, you've got applications, and then you have operations. And across all those areas, there are, I think it's close to 200 KPIs now that have been developed out of the box with executive scorecard. And you can see at the bottom there how they've been segmented out, and this continues to grow with every release that they do with executive scorecard. Kind of some history behind where this all came about was a few years back, HP had gone around worldwide to over 100 CIOs and interviewed them, understanding how do they measure their business, what are their key success factors, and through that they came up with these 180 plus KPIs, and those are defined as their best practice KPIs, and that's really how these all came about. So why executive scorecard? This, I think, probably speaks the most, I think, in terms of why executive scorecard is so compelling. One is being able to improve performance through near real-time visibility. What we tend to see a lot with a lot of the demos that we do a lot of POCs for customers, is that today they have usually some kind of a PowerPoint presentation. And there's usually a small group of people behind that PowerPoint that has to spend several hours. In many cases, you could have at least a full-time resource responsible for manually gathering all this information on a weekly basis to present to the leadership the following week. Well, what happens there is you kind of lose the concept of near real time. You're looking at data that's at least a week old, and so having actionable data is no longer really feasible. On top of that, it tends to be more static, and so the data is not something you can necessarily drill down to. It's usually a PowerPoint. It's not interactive. It is what it is. It shows kind of where we've been, but it doesn't really give me any current information, nor does it give me the right level of detail that they may ask questions about. Which leads into the second one, manual reporting. The great thing about Executive Scorecard, it can be 100% automated. So you can pull from as many systems as you have. Clearly there's an advantage if there's out of the box. If you have a lot of the HP solutions, those are automatically configured. However, with the Executive Scorecard, it has all the tools to pull from any resource very quickly. Whether it's a hosted solution or any data source, you can pull that information in very quickly into the Executive Scorecard and add additional KPIs to what's already developed out of the box. The way the scorecard is set up is it aggregates all of your key performance indicators into a single scorecard. So again, whether you have third-party data or you have existing HP solutions, it'll bring all that information together into a consolidated scorecard. Obviously, it improves performance against strategic goals and objectives. And the last bullet on there talks about the scorecard itself. What's great about this is it's very easy to update your goals. So whenever you embark upon this type of a project, you would deploy this. It deploys very quickly. But once you set up your goals and objectives, which then cascade down to your KPIs, you want to be able to set thresholds as far as what determines the success or failure as far as red, yellow, green of those KPIs. You can actually adjust those thresholds over time. So you may start off allowing a little more leeway, and then as the strategy starts to unfold and people start to adopt the process, you can then start to tighten up those controls around those goals as far as what determines a successful KPI. This shows kind of a couple screenshots of Executive Scorecard. We talked about this already. It does have a lot of out-of-the-box content, which allows you to set this up very quickly. The KPI architecture supports continuous business improvement, which means you can continue to add more data sources. You can go back through and reevaluate existing KPIs, maybe change those calculations. You have complete control to do that very easily. It doesn't require coding. Very easy to do. The third one is it's extensible, so you can bring in any data source. And it's also personalized and customizable. So what you see here in these screenshots, these dashboards, once you've actually set up all of the KPIs and the scorecards in the system, this type of a dashboard, you can literally start from scratch and design it in probably 2 minutes. So everything's ready to go. It's just a matter of picking and choosing what you want to put on your own dashboard, how you want to display that visualization on your page. Let me just go and bring this up. So this talks about enabling continuous business improvement with the Executive Scorecard. It uses a balanced scorecard approach. So if you look at the KPIs, it has a lot of your financial KPIs as well as a lot of non-financial KPIs. And starting at the top, you have your scorecard, and you have your objectives, which will then cascade down within your organization. The next level down will be your key performance indicators. And then the lowest level is where you'll then take those KPIs and actually have actionable insight into how you can improve those KPIs. A couple ways to do that, which we're going to show. One is by having the ability to drill down to a report. You can drill down directly into an application. And you can also create annotations, which is a very useful way of conveying information from a KPI and putting information in, assigning an annotation, almost like a little Twitter feed. You can actually assign those little notes to a specific KPI. Again, the scorecard is very personalized and customizable. You have complete control as far as how you want to display your dashboard page, and it's really as easy as dragging and dropping the components that make up the dashboard page. A couple different examples here. This, I think, is one of my last slides. This talks about the Extensible platform, and what I'll do is I'll start at the bottom, work my way up. It's actually not as confusing as it looks. Really at the bottom is all your different data sources you have out there. I've kind of separated those off to the right, those data sources. Those are what is out of the box today with Executive Scorecard. There are now, I believe, 16 data sources from ALM to UCMDB, BSM, Asset Manager, PPM. These are all automatically integrated into Executive Scorecard. So if you have any of these solutions, it's really just providing your authentication credentials, pushing a button, and by the next morning, all that information that it needs will be fed directly into the Executive Scorecard data warehouse and presented on your dashboard. In addition to that, you can bring in, I've listed a couple data sources down there, but there really is no limitation. You can have either an enterprise ERP or CRM solution. You want to bring information in to be able to provide your own KPIs. You may have data in Excel. There's ways you can actually automate that entire process from taking data from, you may have some Excel files sitting on a shared folder somewhere. You can actually have that grabbed every day and brought into the data warehouse completely automatic. Or you may even have a centralized data warehouse solution, and you can certainly leverage that as well. With the Executive Scorecard, it has the SAP Business Objects Data Services tool, and that's for those that may be familiar with data warehousing. That it's very similar to Informatica, which is probably the industry leader out there. You can bring in any data source, and you can automate that from the source all the way to your target, which happens to be the Executive Scorecard database. And then as you get towards the top layer, that's really where the different ways that you can interact with the Executive Scorecard. The collaboration refers to the annotation, which I'm going to show as part of the demo. The Executive Scorecard also supports mobility, so you can display the Executive Scorecard using the HP Anywhere layer, and then there's a Executive Scorecard mini app that you can download and use on any mobile device. Reporting, because it also has SAP Business Objects Enterprise embedded within the solution, so you can create any report you want to provide any level of detail, and that's really when you get to the operational level. Those reports can be scheduled, they can be emailed, a lot of capabilities using business objects to further extend the Executive Scorecard. And the key piece up there at the top, we have UI mashup. That's the main feature we'll be showing today, how you can actually integrate different solutions together right through one seamless interface. And here's some more details. Okay, now let's start with the demo. So what I've done is I've already logged into one of our Executive Scorecard environments, and let me just first take a minute to explain kind of how the whole look and feel, how it all works. What you'll notice here, I have 5 pages that is visible to me. And the first one is the CIO page, the second one the VP of Operations, VP of Applications. I have a Service Manager Director page, like a Help Desk page, and then a PMO page. Typically you would have 1 page per user. You have complete control over how many pages you want to create, as well as whatever content you choose to display on that page. And you can then decide, from a security perspective, who gets access to which pages. So here, let's take a look at the CIO page first. And you'll notice on this page, there's actually 3 components that make up the page. The component on the left, this is the actual scorecard itself. And the way the scorecard is set up is you have in bold these different perspectives, which are customer excellence, operational excellence, security and compliance, IT business value, and as I scroll down, you have organizational excellence. And the next level down is really your goals or your objectives. So the first one here underneath customer excellence is to improve service delivery performance, followed by customer satisfaction. Now these are all set up out of the box. We've probably done some slight adjustments to them, but for the most part these are the best practice goals and objectives which have KPIs that cascade down. But you can certainly create this however you want. There's no limitation whatsoever as far as how you want to design your scorecard. Now let me go ahead and select one of these objectives. So here we'll select the goal is to improve customer satisfaction. You'll notice whenever I select this, the KPIs that make up that particular goal come into view. And so here we have underneath the customer satisfaction goal, we have demands backlog, percentage of approved project changes, network latency, project scope changes. And as you scroll across, there's actually quite a few here. It looks like there's about 16 different KPIs that make up this one goal, so that you can have an unlimited number of KPIs per goal. By default, they're organized to where you're going to be seeing those that are in the red are going to be displayed first. So in this case, the first KPI, let me scroll all the way back over here to the left, You'll notice all these KPIs are well into the red. They're not acceptable. It's the current month of July. And as we scroll to the right, we can then start to see the ones that are in the yellow, which are considered a warning status. And then the ones on the end are going to be those that are actually acceptable within the green. And you can certainly control that as well if you decide to change the order, but that's typically how you want to see those. You want to see the KPIs that are not performing in the current time period. These KPIs are set up on a monthly basis. You can certainly change that. You can have KPIs on a daily, a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly, or a yearly basis. So you have complete control over how often you want to see these KPIs. On a monthly basis, really what that means is it creates your trend. So, for example, if I select demands backlog, I'm going to see the trend for that KPI come into view in my bottom component, which is my historical view. In the current month, I have 179 requests that are in backlog. The prior month, I had 163. But as you can see, it's continued to ramp up. So we clearly have a problem there. It's well beyond our range of what's considered acceptable, which is much lower down here. So what we can do is we can actually dive into this KPI by selecting this little icon. And what this does, this actually takes us into this Explore tab and gives us a little more detail about what's going on with this KPI. So here, again, we can see the trending for this KPI. Depending how much data, we can go back much further in time. We can go back up to 3 years, depending how much data you have. You can also change the visualization in terms of how you want to represent that, from a line to a bar chart. And then the third option is a grid, which is great because now I can kind of see visually how that KPI is trending versus the prior month. And so you'll notice that it continues to trend in the wrong direction. Something new they've added to this version, this release that we're looking at now just came out 3 weeks ago, so it's a very new release. From what I've noticed, it's very, very stable. This is one of the new features. They've actually added the data set, and so oftentimes those that look at the executive scorecard, they want to know what data made up that KPI. How did you arrive at this 179 demands? You can actually see the raw data right here, and in addition, you can actually export this to Excel as well. The third one is the goal map. This really is a great visualization because it shows, again, how this particular KPI, it's being viewed not only on the CIO dashboard, which is what we were looking at a minute ago, but it's also represented on the VP of Applications. So it shows that within the organization, you have the same alignment to the common goal, which is to decrease the overall demand backlog that you have in your system. So in this case, let's talk about annotation. So here we have a situation, we have a KPI that's clearly not performing well, it's going in the wrong direction. I can now come over here and create an annotation. So let's say, for example, the person responsible for this KPI is Bill, and we need to understand from his perspective, really, how do we improve this? So I can actually create a note in here. So I can put a little annotation in here, and I can then send that. And I can also not only add it as an annotation, but I can also send it as an email, so I know that he's going to be getting that annotation. But I can also just simply add it as a new annotation. Now what's going to happen is whenever Bill logs into his executive scorecard and looks at his dashboard page, he's going to see this annotation in there, and you can then have that back and forth collaboration. One area where this has been very useful is you think about VP of Operations, and whenever they have outages, this is a great way to go in there and actually put in annotations every time you have a major outage to explain what's going on and why you had that outage. And it keeps this in history, and so you will have, just like you have the trending month over month, you also have the annotations that go along with that trending that explains why a particular KPI trended up or trended down. Let's go ahead and step back out of the Explorer and go back to the dashboard page. One quick note on the score, and then we'll go take a look at a few other pages. The score is really what drives the entire dashboard page. You'll notice here, for example, I'll use customer satisfaction as the example. you have a score of 6.15. Now, what this does is it takes all these KPIs over here that make up this goal, and it doesn't matter if it's a percentage or in this case, milliseconds for network latency. It could be a dollar amount, a financial number. Based on how you set up each individual KPI and set up each threshold, it takes every one of those individually and then rolls them up into an overall score on a range of 0 to 10. Typically, anything below 6 is considered red. Below 6 is considered red. From 6 to 7 is typically in the warning state. And when you get into the 8, 9, and 10, that's typically acceptable. You have complete control over that. You can certainly set up weighted averages on different KPIs, so you can have certain KPIs have more of an impact than other KPIs. So in this case, customer satisfaction, obviously it's trending, it's improving overall versus the prior time period, which is what this up arrow represents. But we're still in the warning state, and it's because these particular KPIs we're seeing right here are what's most likely providing the most impact to that value. So as we start to improve the demand backlog, reduce that number, address our project scope changes, maybe improve our network latency, that's then going to start to improve our overall score for that time period. And as you can see, as I jump from objective to objective, I can actually see all those KPIs come into view. So very powerful to have this at your fingertips. Now let's take a look at another page. I'm going to jump over to the VP of Operations. I'm going to save the best for last. I'm going to go to the VP of Apps page. Again, just shows you a different visualization. This one also has a scorecard for VP of Applications, and this is, again, slightly different. It has probably the same perspectives. There's a customer perspective, operational excellence, IT value, secure IT, and then feature orientation. And I also have some KPIs on here, and these are going to be my default KPIs. So for example, every time I log in, I'm going to see this same list of KPIs. I can certainly at a moment's notice come in here and reconfigure this one component, and maybe tomorrow I have a different set of KPIs I want to focus on. I can certainly change that on a day-to-day basis if I want to. Then as I select a different objective, I'm also going to get those KPIs come into view that make up that objective. And now I have those KPIs just in a slightly different visual. So now let's take a look at a new component they've added in this release, which is this breakdown view. What we're going to do is we're going to go to in customer satisfaction, let's take a look at the percentage of affected end users, which is one of the KPIs here. There we go. And as I select this KPI, refresh my page here. Give me 1 second. Okay. Yes. They select percentage of affected end users. I'm not only going to get the trending down at the bottom month over month, but now I can actually see, in this case, which applications were affecting this KPI. So again, this is just demo data, but in your environment, you would have your individual applications listed. It's going to show your top 10. Obviously, these are my top 10 offenders, if you will. In this case, this first application, 97% of the end users were affected, and on. You can see that. You can also choose the bottom 10 as well, depending on the KPI that you're looking at. You can also choose in this case, it just has the 1. But you could have other ways to break this down as well. Let's take a look at one more KPI, which is the project scope changes backlog. That should also be here in this as part of this goal. Here we go. And again, we're going to see the trending at the bottom, month over month. And you'll notice that in the history, the color tells you what they were. So for the current month, we're red. In June, we were red. And for this particular KPI, in the month of May, we were in the warning status. Prior to that, we were obviously in a much better state. So here, this is the project scope changes, and this shows you by organization the top 10 orgs that were submitting the different scope changes. I can also change this, for example, to a project to see what projects actually have the greatest scope changes. And I can see that as well for the current time period. And I also have the ability to visualize this slightly differently. I can actually change this to a radar and it shows you the different projects this way. And there's also the grid as well. The next thing I want to show is something they've had since the beginning with Executive Scorecard, which is a really cool feature, is the ability to cascade from one scorecard to another. So imagine if I'm the VP of Applications, I want to be able to understand what the VP of Operations is looking at. I may not necessarily have access to this page up here, but I can certainly still get to their scorecard. Now notice next to the VP of Applications there's a little arrow here. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to select the VP of Ops. And now that's going to spin around, and it's now going to show me the VP of Operations scorecard on my dashboard page and allow me to now drill into that particular scorecard and visualize what that individual would see on their dashboard. So same thing here. Let's take a look at a couple of the breakdowns. Let's go down to customer satisfaction again. And we'll take a look at the percentage of met SLA. And you'll notice that this scorecard is now automatically wired to my dashboard. I can now drill not only into the scorecard, but also all the way down to the breakdown level and get whatever view I want. In this case, I have by service name. It shows that in the current month, we're at 100% SLA, which is great. We don't have any issues. And I also get my history as well. And now what I'm going to do now, we have 2 more pages, and I'm going to jump and show you the UI mashup, which is the latest that ResultsPositive has put together for the Executive Scorecard. So let's take a look at so this would be more of a help desk dashboard. Again, just shows you a different visualization. You still have the Executive Scorecard. You have the KPIs. And as you jump from goal to goal, you're going to see those KPIs come into view down here. And as I select a KPI, let's take a look at one of these. You're going to get the historical view, and you also get the breakdown view. So again, we can probably select customer satisfaction again and do percentage of met SLA, and I'm going to get that same view here. It also has pie chart components as well that you can visualize different KPIs. Now let's take a look at the VP of Operations. So this is something unique that we've done with Executive Scorecard. This is really what we talk about, being able to bridge that gap between strategy and operations. This allows you to get all the way down to the whatever level of detail you need to get to understand what's going on. So here we have a VP of Operations scorecard, like we saw earlier. And what I'm going to do, you'll notice that we have the scorecard, we have our KPIs, and we have the historical trending as well. Now let's take a look at the real-time analytics. And as I select now a KPI, in this case I'm going to select percentage of non-encrypted traffic. What this is doing, it's going out to BSM in real time, and it's bringing back a report that was generated in BSM. So this is really where you're able to get in real time and leverage your existing assets, whether it's PPM or ALM, BSM. This could be a non-HP solution. This could be ServiceNow. It could be Remedy if you have that for your help desk. There really is no limitation at this point. Setting this up is a very easy process, and you can actually have every individual KPI can go to a different data source immediately. So I'll go ahead and select the next one down in this list of KPIs, which is the network latency. And this will go out, and this also goes out to BSM, and it brings back a different visual. And the next one down, we saw this one earlier, percentage of affected end users by application quality. And this, again, brings back a different chart. I know the data is showing May, but it's probably because we have not refreshed the data, but this can certainly be a real-time. I think I do have a couple other examples in here that are showing the real-time. Go with Met Application Performance. And here's one, again, another report, BSM. And a couple more here, percentage of Met Service Performance. So again, you have the ability to use the UI mashup concept to be able to get from a strategic goal down to a KPI, and from that KPI you get the trending, but you can also drill all the way into what's happening right now in my environment. And I'll do one more, the percentage of Met SLA. And let's take a look at one last page, which is the PMO page, a little different. This also shows my scorecard. It has my KPIs, and then in this case I have several different KPIs that I want to see whenever I first log into my page, and it shows the trending for each of these 4 KPIs. But we also have embedded a portlet in here, and in this case I can actually, if you have an existing reporting solution, now everything you see here was developed using business objects, which comes packaged with Executive Scorecard. But if you have your own reporting solution, that can also be embedded just as easily as you see here. And I can jump from, for example, if I wanted to look at one of my projects or my reports that I have, I can jump from report to report. So it allows me to go all the way down to the lowest level of detail and get that information. This particular report also has a link, and so in this case I can go from Executive Scorecard. In this case, it's PPM is the data that's being represented. I can actually select a particular hyperlink, and I can jump right into my PPM application. And that can then take me right into that project as well. And so the UI Matchup is a very powerful way to go from a very high-level strategy all the way down to whatever level of detail that you want to present on an Executive Scorecard. And there we have that project. So at this point, I'm now in PPM, and I can certainly make changes, navigate with the PPM. Once I'm done, I can then close the browser, and I'm right back to my Executive Scorecard.